हेलो। 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 विमलेश, सुन रहे हो मुझे?
Good morning, sir. Sir, are you able to hear me?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी, विमलेश कैसे हो?
मैं बढ़िया हूँ सर, आप कैसे हैं?
अच्छा, ठीक है। अभी आवाज सही आ रही है मेरी?
Yes, sir. Very good, sir. So
ओके,
our speaker
ठीक।
is also waiting. He will join sharp at 12.
ओके,
Okay, sir.
ठीक है, करने दीजिए ज्वाइन स्पीकर्स और पार्टिसिपेंट्स को, फिर करते हैं स्टार्ट।
हाँ जी, हाँ जी.
विमलेश।
Yes, sir.
हाँ, एक बार ना आप मेरे को बना दिया आपने को होस्ट।
हाँ जी, बना दिया मैंने.
दो दो एंट्री होंगी मेरी, दोनों को बना दो।
Okay, sir. Done.
ठीक है।
ठीक है जी, ठीक है.
ओके। Hello, Vimlesh. Are you listening to me, Vimlesh?
Yes, sir, I'm hearing you. You are audible, sir. Hello. हाँ जी सर.
Hello, I'm
Yes, sir,
audible.
you are audible, sir. Our expert for the
Okay,
session,
okay,
Dr. Savik Chatterjee has joined. Sir, please start.
okay, okay. Thank you, thank you. So, very good afternoon to all of you. And today we are having Dr. Souvik Chatterjee as the expert for this particular session with us. And Dr. Souvik is currently working in education team at MathWorks. He has worked in University of Illinois at Chicago as postdoctoral associate and Enterprise Works Chicago as strategy consultant for commercialization of academic innovations. He is advocating computational thinking and model-based product-oriented interdisciplinary approach in research and education, partnering with universities across the country. He is recipient of Best PhD Thesis Award and Young Scientist Award from International Society for Energy, Environment and Sustainability. He has co-authored multiple journal articles, book chapters, and is co-inventor of 2 US patents. He completed his graduation in engineering, specifically in mechanical engineering from Jadavpur University and a dual MS PhD degree from Jadavpur University and Virginia Tech US. Sir, a warm welcome to you for this 6 day uh, faculty development program on robotics and CNC. I welcome to you to this program, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Sure. Thank you for the warm welcome and thanks for inviting us as part of the FDP. Um, yeah, I'll share the screen as well. And um, right, let me know when the screen is visible.
Yes, sir, it is visible to
Okay,
us.
thank you. Um, right, I'll open up the slideshow. And in the meantime, if anybody has questions, feel free to put in the chat window. I'll use the chat window to look into the questions and anything. Um, just find it out. Okay. So as mentioned, we will discuss. So uh, Vimla sir also mentioned of having predictive maintenance as part of the topic. So we will talk about predictive maintenance in general and how that can impact multiple things in form of manufacturing, and where do robotics actually fit in this entire spectrum. I'll switch off my camera so that we do not have bandwidth issues. Um, And again, feel free to post anything in the chat window. I have the chat window open and we can use that for question answer. And also I can address during the slides as well if anything comes up. And at any point, if the slides are not visible or my audio is not clear, again, please feel free to interrupt and then we can make sure that that works. Um, so what we will do is we will talk about what essentially this concept of predictive maintenance is. So in terms of if we look into, in any form of maintenance, so maintenance in the sector of manufacturing, if we think about any manufacturing area for any industry, it can be like an automobile industry, it can be like an aircraft industry, any pumps, any parts of anything essentially. There can be different sorts of maintenance. We call it, it can be reactive maintenance, it can be preventive maintenance or predictive maintenance. So there are differences. The differences is essentially what it means in English. So for example, reactive is if something fails, we will take an action, right? So that is reactive maintenance. Preventive is more of a cautionary maintenance. So we know that that this machine will fail, say for example, in another 1 month. So we will take care of it in another 20 days from now. So if that sort of things happen, that we know that this is uh, the rather useful life of a machine, then we take care of that along that time. And that can happen for anything, right? So for example, if we think about any form of a machine or a bridge, any pump or anything, we can think of it like that this pump might have a expected life of another 2 months or something like that, and then we can take care of the maintenance. We have to do any kind of maintenance like lubrication, change the motor or all of those things in another maybe like 30 or 50 days from now. So that is where preventive comes into the picture. Predictive is we find out that this fault can happen in the future, and that is how this fault can hamper my manufacturing line, maybe by reducing the efficiency by 4% or 5%, and based on that we take care of something. So this is a very dynamic procedure where we actually figure out what can be the category of fault, what sort of fault can happen in the manufacturing line, and then take care of that in that sort of a form. Now, if we think about this looks very fancy and it also is useful. Say, for example, when we think about, bridges collapsing or downtime of a factory, all these things can be saved. And when we save that, it helps in a lot of ways. Like bridge collapsing, if we can take care of that, that this can fail, it saves a lot of people as well. And in terms of downtime of factories, if we save downtime, it means a lot of advantages. That advantage can be, say, for example, in any of these industries, they also talk about like money saved is money earned. So if somebody can save money in doing this sort of predictive maintenance, that is essentially savings of that company. Now that's what basically means in this sort of slide here, what we talk about these three things in a little more detail. So reactive, scheduled is what we call the preventive one, and then predictive, and this has direct uh, sort of things for the cost thing. So when we talk about so condition based monitoring, condition based maintenance is where we call the predictive maintenance part. What we want to achieve is essentially, there are these two sort of costs, maintenance cost and operating cost, and we want to optimize them. We want to be in a position where we have the total cost to be minimized, and we have the maintenance cost and the operating cost to be pretty much in an optimum stage. Because if we do some kind of a preventive or corrective maintenance, we reduce one cost or the other. So what we will talk about is how can we do this, and what can be a challenge when we want to when we want to actually do this form of any um, maintenance situations. And how can environment simulation tools help in that sort of an environment where we want to do preventive maintenance, right? So now let's proceed. What exactly happens in this form of a situation is we use a lot of different type of techniques, but if we look from a very big picture basic thing, what we have is data and we want to come to a decision. Now what does that data mean eventually? So data means we have data from all the machines. Let's say for example, if a pump is running and we want the rpm data of it, So we get that data. We can have a torque meter, and then we get all the RPM data. We can have the noise out of it, right? The noise in the sense, I mean, I can just use my phone to record the audio data from here. And based on that data, we actually find out what is the condition of that machine. Whether the, I mean, just say, if I think from a very, um, uh, if we don't know any of these things, we basically just record the audio of the pump, and then can I say from the pump data whether the, what is the condition of the machine? I mean, very experienced people can actually do that, and then so that is the state of the machine. But can also, can we do like how long will this pump run with this sort of an efficiency? If we can predict that, then it becomes very useful, because then we can say that okay, this is something that's going on, and then we can take care of that the pump. So if I say, for example, hypothetically, if I just hear the sound of the pump and say, oh, this pump sound looks like this, it will run for another 1 week, and then we need to take care of the maintenance at that point of time. So we come to a decision. So we have the data, and then we come to a decision, and these two parts play a big role there. One is the condition monitoring. So condition monitoring is what is the current state of my machine, and then when do I need to do maintenance of the machine. So these two aspects, the condition monitoring and predictive maintenance, come together, so that we can actually transform the data to a decision. Because if we there are two parts of it, like if we have data, and then what to do with the data. If we do not know what to do with the data, then it just becomes data which is not really useful. So how do I actually make a sense out of that data so that we can come to a decision? Now, if we go into a little more detail of what sort of an application we can think of now, if we look into this video, there is this wind turbine running. And this wind turbine actually got uh, faced a cyclone, and it got torn apart. Now, what is actually happening here? The people who have built it, of course, yeah, they have taken into consideration the perfect design situation, and all those things, but still it failed. Now, why? The reason it failed is because it faced a tornado, right? And when it faces a tornado, it comes to a situation which is not probably, it's not known that this can handle that. Now, say for example, if I have to create a design of this sort of a wind turbine, what do we need to do? We need to make it a way that it can handle this sort of failure situations. Now, how do we actually make it, a handle failure situation is something that's what is interesting to look into. Because we cannot make a we cannot just make it to like we cannot create a wind turbine and then let it handle let it be broken down in a cyclone, because we are just losing a lot of time, labor, and money if we just let it go. But can we actually mimic the situation that will arise when there is a cyclone? Right? Can we do that? In that case, we can actually let it be face those kind of environments which it can face in real time. Because the problem is, say for example, if I create this wind turbine, how do I actually have the failure data unless it actually has failed? Right? So if you are creating this wind turbine or a pump or anything, or a aircraft or a bridge or any parts of the bridge, how do we actually do the design such that it can actually handle the failure data? Because if we have to have the failure, then we have to let it fail, right? We can make the design in terms of the equations, and all the equations. We can have the drag minimize to have the increase in efficiency of the wind turbine in terms of increase electricity production. All those things we can do, but the failure, when it happens, that really does not fall into a classical equation sort of an environment. It just happens because of the data, because it just goes to that wind velocity, that torrential rain or the wind velocity that it is happening, that it is facing, that cannot be modeled by an equation. That is happening just because it is happening in the real world. Now, how do we actually take into consideration all these sort of failure situations when we are designing this? Because a failure happens all of a sudden, and we do not have a prior information on what sort of failure can come into the picture. So those things, if we have to have in real life, that requires a lot of effort. And then essentially we have to lose all these wind turbines or all these manufactured equipments if we have to let it fail, and then we have to change it accordingly. So what we are going to talk about is, if we have to convert this data to decision, what are the things we need? One of the things we need is this failure data. What do we actually mean by a failure? What is something when we say that this has failed? And say, for example, if this pump has to fail, how do we actually say what is failure? So that, we use this failure data to predict when something can be in the verge of failing, right? Again, if there are any questions, feel free to post in the chat window. And if there's something which is need more clarification, something which is not clear, feel free to put it in the chat window, and we can discuss more on that as well. Now, um, and multiple companies are using this. All these are manufacturing companies: Baker Hughes, Safran, Mondi. They make different sorts of machineries, and these are being used now in multiple industries like Tata Motors, different sorts of chiller like power plants. They are using this form of a thing which is called predictive maintenance, which essentially incorporates classic like the typical AI workflow, which we call of machine learning, deep learning, along with this engineering platforms. Because AI is not limited to things like what we come up in like Facebook sort of companies or that sort of things. It's there in the manufacturing world big time now. So when people are using something in the manufacturing spectrum, is basically we can use this in different formats, so that we can actually do this kind of a predictive maintenance workflow. So I'll come to like how to do about that, but multiple industries are essentially using it in different languages. So one is predictive maintenance. There is something called digital twin. So digital twin comes up in the next aspect. Now, what is digital twin? Let's use the chat window for a little bit of interactions now. Anybody has heard about the terminology predictive maintenance or chat window? If you have, you can just mention in the chat window yes or no. Uh, and then if you have yes, like which one have you heard? Like you can mention predictive maintenance, or you can mention digital twin. Um, it will be good to have a little bit of interactions in the chat window. Okay, no. If you have anybody has heard about these terminologies, predictive maintenance or digital twin. If you have, uh, please say yes, and then we can have a little bit of interaction as well. Yes, okay, nice. So Dr. Ajay said, do you want to mention a little bit on what contents are you working on predictive maintenance or digital twins, or in what context if you have heard it? You can come off unmute as well if that is a possibility. I'm just a bit aware. Okay, nice. So these are some of the terminology. So we'll talk about how it is. I mean, we have not gone into how to start with it. We will talk about, because the thing is, when we talk about these things, digital twin or predictive maintenance, it's not like it's a very new concept. It's all of these things are there. It's just about we are using some of the new emerging technologies with the traditional technologies. So whatever we are doing in the manufacturing spectrum, it is all there. So it's not like we are not kind of replacing and come up with a new technology. So what was happening was artificial intelligence or machine learning. These were used by computer scientists for a long time. And then manufacturing people like I am from, again, mechanical. So we have been using our own things for a long time. Now what is happening is these things are getting clubbed, and just the clubbing of that uh, this manufacturing sort of segments with AI is leading to these things. So it's not a new technology. It's just like if you have heard that phrase of old wine in a new bottle. So we are putting certain things in a new context. So that is what essentially we are doing. We are just putting multiple new things, or rather two old things together. So interdisciplinary approach to solving new things. And if you look into digital twin, this is in the Wikipedia page, there are multiple names of that. There's something called cyber objects, digital avatar, cyber physical system. These are all in Wikipedia. So if you look up into Wikipedia, all these things are there. Now, what is digital twin? People talk about digital twin in different concepts. And you can have your own definition of digital twin as well. Ideally, what it means is there is a digital avatar, what people say as well. So there is a digital platform where we are simulating, say for example, a manufacturing segment, and also there is a physical where it is actually happening in the physical world. And then what we do is we club both of them. So whatever is happening in the simulation world and whatever is happening in the physical world, we get the information flow from each other, so that we have a fully functioning system where we have both of them running together. So we have the digital world simulation running and we have the physical world running simulation. Now, what we talk about, say, of cyclone, right? So we have the cyclone situation simulated in our simulation world. So then what happens is we know from simulation world what are the design criteria, or what do we actually need to do if there is a cyclone. And then the physical world actually takes the information from the digital world real time, because cyclone is a one-off thing, but you can have multiple different situations. So all those situations sits on the digital world, and the information just flows from the digital world to the simulation world, to the physical world whenever is needed. And it's not like a person needs to do that. We can just make it in a in a streamed environment, so that it happens seamlessly um, without intervention of human. And that's what the industries are adopting in the form of digital twin. um, Now, what exactly is this thing? So we understand that there is a simulation world, there is a physical world. Now, what exactly is happening? We'll come to the basics as well. um, Now, let's think about a definition of it. What we are saying is it's an up-to-date representation of a real asset in operation. Now, there are multiple terminologies here if you look into it. Up-to-date. So up-to-date is we are always learning. That means if there is a machine running, if there is a manufacturing operation going on, then we have multiple equations to model that. Those are there. But then it's also up to date in the sense we are getting the data what we are generating. So for example, if you have a pump running, you are generating the flow rates and the pressure, right? So the pressure and flow rate maybe you are taking. And that's all the data we are using to do something. We'll talk about what, but we are getting those data, but the data is also up to date. So for example, if I had some data till yesterday, whatever has happened today, we are adding that to our data, right? So it's up to date. Now, representation means as close as possibly we are getting to the real world situation. The real world can have multiple environmental hazards. It can have multiple other situations, other problems. Like which equation cannot always take care of. So the representation is closest to the real world. So we are clubbing our physical equations, like the first principle model equations, with the data we are getting, so that we can have an up-to-date representation of the real asset in operation. So it's not like we do the simulation and get rid of the situation. So say for example, we do the situation during the design phase and then that's it. That is not the situation. Whatever we are doing in the digital world, that is always updated during the operation. So it's not like simulation and the physical world are two different platforms. We are bringing them together so that they all talk to each other, right? Okay. Again, so these are the terminologies what are there. Now, there are two aspects of it. When we are doing any sort of modeling, there is a physics-based modeling. Physics-based modeling means we can do modeling of any systems like a pump. So you can have a centrifugal pump. You can have like a drilling operations. So all those things are there what we can create using our physics-based modeling, which can be equations, right? Which can be two-phase flow modeling, which can be any operation of a lathe. So all those things we can do by physics. And then there is data-driven modeling. So the data-driven modeling consists of something called machine learning. Now, what is machine learning is basically based on data. I'll come to a little bit about what that means. But in very basic overview of a language, what it means is we have data and we learn from the data. So for example, if I have like what we were giving the example. So for example, if I record audio from a pump, right, and just play it in my phone, I record it via the phone. And then if I give that recorded audio data to, say, for example, a black box, right? A box. And then what the box will give me, whether that audio data is correct or not, right? So if that box can be trained with the data, that is, this sort of data are good noise of a pump, noise of a good operation of a pump. And this sort of, so for example, I get 100 data, right? I get 100 data, which is the noise of a pump which is running normally, and I get 100 data of a noise of a pump which is not normal. So if I say, for example, train my model with this 100 data of a normal pump and 100 data of abnormal pump, I can train my model so that the model can identify what is a normal pump data and what is a abnormal pump data. And once I create that model, what can happen is, if I give a random pump noise to this model, it can predict whether the pump is functioning normally or abnormally. So that is basically, from a very high level overview, what it means by machine learning. And there are multiple parts of it, and which I'm not going to the details of it because that's another concept. But that is what data-based modeling is. And then we have the physics-based modeling, where we can simulate multiple different operations. Maybe we can talk about a little bit of interactions here again. Anybody has worked on, the machine learning or deep learning part of it? You can just mention again a yes or a no. If you are aware of it, if you are planning to look into it, if you are doing something, yes, okay. Anybody else are planning or doing anything on the machine learning, deep learning parts? Because we are not going to very high level, we will be in the basics, and then if you have any more information, you can always reach out to us, and we can provide more information. Anybody else, you can put again a yes or no if you have machine learning using. Okay, nice, very nice. Okay, so that's what all these classification techniques are about, ANN and SVM. Anybody else has worked on machine learning or planning to do machine learning or deep learning, anything on AI? Yes or no will be helpful. Okay, nice. Okay, so some people maybe. Now I'm not going to the details again. So even if you have not, it should not be matter. We'll talk about a way where you can use all these techniques for anything. So it's not like we have to, deal with always machine learning. We have to know machine learning, deep learning always to the full. It's about using those tools, right? Now, what do we talk about when we say, for example, a digital twin? I'll take an example and then we'll dig deep into this example. Now, if we look into this example contains a digital twin, which means, so what we are doing is we have like pumps being manufactured in different locations, right? So you can have like different locations from where we are creating multiple pumps. Now that different sorts of pumps can have different, so this is the rig, oil rig, and in this oil rig, which we are concerned is only this positive displacement pump, right? So if you look into this positive displacement pump, now there are multiple of these positive displacement pumps which are manufactured in different locations, right? So our asset here is our positive displacement pump. So the pump is in operation inside the oil rig. This is our operation, right? So you have rigs, multiple rigs that are there, and then multiple of these contains many of these centrifugal pumps, positive displacement pumps. Up to date means, so it is operating, right? What we want to do, our objective here is, when the pump is operating, what we want to do is we want to give the data we generate from the pump. From the pump means it's a pressure and the flow rate, right? Those two outputs we get from the pump, and then we get it into a algorithm. We'll talk about what this thing is. So from the pump we get data as in the form of, let's see if I can annotate. Yeah. So this is the pump. So we get from the pump pressure and flow rate. So these are the two things we are getting from the pump. And then these are varying with time. And then we put all of these things into predictive maintenance algorithm. And what we want to see is we want to find out whether it can find out fault. So like this sort of fault. So we categorize a fault as it can be healthy. Healthy means there is no fault. Or it can say that there is a blocked inlet in my pump, or there is a seal leakage, or there is a worm bearing, or it can be any of the other combinations. So it can be blocked inlet plus worm bearing, or it can be seal leakage plus worm bearing, or seal leakage plus blocked inlet. So these are all the sort of things which can be there for these sort of faults. So the objective here, what we want to do is we want to see whether if we give this data to a predictive maintenance algorithm, just for now, just imagine a predictive maintenance algorithm to be a box where we want to give this pressure and the flow rate. And once we give that flow rate, what we can do is once we have this pump, it goes to the predictive maintenance algorithm. And then what we want is we want this this sort of all these other sort of faults that come up from this output. Or more specifically, what we want to do is, let's see, the challenge here. So the challenge here is, how do we actually know what is a failure data? Which means, how do we know what is a blocked inlet? Like, how does the pressure look like when we have a blocked inlet? How does the flow rate looks like when we have a blocked inlet? We don't know unless and until we actually have a blocked inlet. Same with seal leakage, worm bearing. So how do we actually get the fault failure data? Because when we are using all this sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning, it's not like a science fiction movie that it can give you that this is a failure. Unless it is trained with that failure, unless we know how failure looks like, the algorithm cannot identify what is a failure data. So we have to find out how can we actually generate, how does the pressure and the flow rate looks like when we have a failure, right? Same for all these other failures. So that is one of the challenges that all these people actually face. How do we actually generate failure data? And then comes the classification part, which Ajay sir was talking about, the SVMs and all those things. So that comes when we do the classification, like what classifies, what sort of data classifies as healthy, what sort of data classifies as blocked inlet, and all those things. But the question comes, how do we actually generate the failure data as well? So that's what something which we'll talk about. But we'll talk about the challenge, how do we solve the challenge, but that is one challenge. And then what we actually want to do is, we have our asset, right? We have our asset in the form of this pump, and then we have the simulation. So the way we want to generate the failure data is using simulations. So we will do simulation, because in the simulation world, there is nothing to lose. I mean, maximum it can happen is we can, the computer can crash, but we can take care of it. That's relatively a less damage as compared to the pump, the first shutdown of the factory, or that sort of a damage. So we can generate the failure data in a simulation environment in the digital world, and then we can have the information flow. In the simulation world, we can put faults in it. Like, say, for example, here we put a blocked inlet. Here we can put a leakage. You can put a worm bearing. So this is how the simulation world looks like. In the simulation world, we can create these faults. We can synthetically create these faults and then generate this data, which, like, for example, how does the pressure and the flow rate looks like when we have a fault, right? We generate the data. And once we generate the data, we put all this data to the machine learning part of it. So we'll come to that later on. So that's how we generate the faulty data. Okay. And once we have the data, what we want to do is, we want to inform the operator that this is the pump which is going to fail. And then the failure reason will be this, right? When the failure reason will be this, that means the pump line will shut down in 15 hours. So if we get classification up to this form of an extent, imagine how it changes the manufacturing pipeline, right? So you have an app where, okay, let's come to this. What we can do is, we can have the simulation running. Ideally, what we want to do is, okay, let me just get rid of this arrow thing. Now, you have all seen this sort of a Google Translator, right? What is happening in this Google Translator is, you feed in a language, and then it will give you the output in a language which you know, right? So I can say, for example, I need help, right? So I need help is English. We don't know all these other languages. All these other languages are unknown to me, right? So I don't know what it means. So I can put into, Google Translator, and Google Translator will tell me I need help. Now, if you compare these other languages with this language here, let me just take up again this thing. So Spotlight, okay. So if you look into this language here, So what is the difference between, you know, this language as compared to this other? These are text which we know, but if we have to find out the meaning, I know only this one. I don't know this, and I don't know all these other ones. So to me, it doesn't matter whether this like a time series data or is this, all these other languages. Essentially, if I put into a Google Translator this signal, as with the other languages, in English it translates me to I need help, right? And if we can make the fault, if we can identify the fault, it can also tell me what exactly the help we need. It's saying that one of my seals is leaking and I'll shut down the line in 5 days. And this is the pump speaking. The pump is saying that one of my seals is leaking and I want to shut down the line in 5 days. And if this form of a thing comes to the operator in the form of an app in the smartphone, this is what is changing the manufacturing industry in some form, because then we can take care of it whenever is needed. So we are saving costs because we are not just changing it after every 2 months or 3 months. We are doing it when it's needed the most. And we take care of the efficiency as well, because when we train the data, we actually take care of the efficiency as well. So this is our output. This is what we want to get at the end of the day. So we give the signal from the pressure rate with the pressure, how it is varying with time, or the flow rate, how it is varying with time. And it can tell me whether I need help or not. So it can tell me whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Plus it gives me this sort of a clarification, this form of a detail. Now, of course, this model or this app is not, again, a science fiction movie which can do this automatically. It has to be trained with all these faults. So I have to generate data of how healthy looks like. I have to generate data of how faulty looks like, and specifically how each fault looks like. How does the pressure and the flow rate looks like when there is a leakage? How does the pressure and flow rate looks like when there is a fault in the bearing? So all those data I have to generate. And once I have the data generated, I can train it using any machine learning algorithm. So that's where the machine learning part come into the picture. Again, it's not like you have to know machine learning to do all those things. We can just use the model that works best when we have the data. So machine learning is just a tool, like mathematics. It's just a tool which we are using because our bigger goal is to solve this manufacturing problem, right? Any questions at this point? If there are any questions before we proceed, again, you can post in the chat window and I can clarify as well. Any questions, any feedback or any thoughts? I mean, we'll have a feedback at the end, but if you have like any things that is not clear and you want a further detailed explanation, or if it's making clear what is making more sense, you can just post in the chat window. Any questions at this point? For example, yeah, we'll talk about the example. Yes. Okay. So this is what we are trying to achieve. Okay, thanks. Now let's see how do we actually do that because of this example. How do we actually solve this problem? So now, as we understand, there are multiple parts to it, right? So we have this sensor data, and ideally what we want is, so we give this pressure with noise and then to the algorithm, and then the algorithm will tell me whether there is a fault, whether it's healthy, which means no fault, which is also fine, or what sort of a fault we have, right? This is what we want to do. And then the digital twin part come into the picture because we want to have a simulation in where we want to incorporate the faults, right? I'll come to the platform of MATLAB Simulink. How do we actually do that? Because what we try to do is our sequential models used for this kind of translations. Nice. Yeah, we'll come to that as well. So for example, what we were talking about here is, I mean, Anand, yeah, nice question. I'll come back to that. So when we are doing all these sort of things, say for example, how do we actually generate the fault? And once we generate the fault, we actually talk about how, we figure out the fault, like what sort of fault is happening. Now, what sort of a way we can do the simulation, because the simulation information needs to go to the AI model real time as well. Uh, Now that's where the in MATLAB the advantage is we can do all together in one platform. So that we can do the visualizations part of it, and we can also do the AI part of it. And for the AI part, we do not have to go for the algorithm specifically. What we can do is we can choose the right algorithm and find out what works best. That's about it. Now, yeah, let me proceed. Mm. So let's see what are the steps now. So we have this asset in operation. This is a this the video what we are seeing. I like this thing of a spotlight. Yeah. So here what is happening is, this is the asset in operation. When we can play here, this video is running. So if you look into this video, what we have is a centrifugal pump where we have 3 pistons, right? And then this thing is moving. There is a fault. So this red one's milled fault. So there is a bearing fault. There is a blocked inlet fault and all these faults. This, when it is generating this data, we are getting as an output of the pressure and the flow rate, and then that is going to some cloud. We can have like a cloud where all this data will go. Like say for example, you can think about a cloud in the form of Dropbox. That can be a very small level cloud, but you can have any bigger level clouds as well, which you have more space and stuff. So the data goes from the real-time asset. Asset is our physical stuff and the simulation. So from the simulation, we get this data. And from the physical world also, we put in sensors like a flow rate sensor and a pressure measuring device, so that we can get the pressure and the flow rate. So we get all this data. And then let's see how the information looks like. So we have this sensor data which we are getting from the hardware, and then we are generating the data from the simulation. And once we have that data, right, that's the first step. We put that data to a pre-processing data format. So pre-processing means, if, for example, you can get rid of outliers. You can also do certain things like just find out the mean, the mode, and all those sort of things. So those sort of things comes in the pre-processing steps. And there is something else called feature extraction, which I'm not. So for example, from the data, if you want to find out what sort of a frequency is there in the data. So all those things find out goes into this pre-processing steps. Right, then the next steps comes out is the extraction of features. So the feature extraction may be what sort of a frequency we have in the pump operation, in the pressure and the flow rate. So that comes up in the feature extraction part. Then we train the model. Right now, in the training model, we can have SVMs, we can have ANNs. We can also use, as Anand was asking, the RNNs and the LSTMs. So we can use recurrent networks or long short-term memory networks. These are some typical networks in the deep learning segment, which we are not going to the details of machine learning, deep learning. There's a subtle difference between machine learning and deep learning. In machine learning, we find out the features. In deep learning, we use loads of networks. These networks are, it can be a convolution network for images, which can be for signals. It can be LSTMs and all those things. But essentially, the modeling part come into the picture in this training model. So that model can be SVMs, which Ajay was talking. It can be NLP for language translation, natural language processing. So all that thing comes in this area, the training the model part. And after that, we put it in the predictive maintenance algorithm. We create the predictive maintenance algorithm and then deploy it on the system. Deploy it on the system means we put it on some hardware. That hardware can be, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, or it can be any devices which can have like an Intel board or NVIDIA board and sort of those things. So this is where all these things come into the picture. So if you look into the sensor data is there in the edge device. Edge device means what is running, like the pump, right? That is our edge device. And then all these things, the pre-processing, the training model, this is offline. This we do not need to have on the edge device or the pump, right? This we can have it on a cloud running in my local system. So the data generated goes to the offline, the cloud, where we can write the machine learning models, the deep learning model, or the model itself. So we can have something running on my local machine, as in the pump, and something we have the machine learning model we can have running on the cloud or in my laptop or in a multiple processor and things like that. So these are these two places where we can deploy. And this is the big picture, the whole picture when something is running. And in each of these segments, we have, multiple research going on. And so if anybody is doing, and there are courses as well, multiple institutes are now giving, like if you look into the AICT curriculum as well, AICT emerging curriculum, there are multiple AI specific aspects and artificial intelligence specific aspects. So artificial intelligence club with robotics as well. And predictive maintenance. So all these things are there in courses, research, and all those things, because this is the big emerging thing nowadays, right? Yeah. So now this is the whole picture. So when we are talking about AI, we cannot leave out manufacturing. And when we are talking about manufacturing, we cannot leave out AI. So all goes hand in hand. And this is how the entire thing goes hand in hand, so that we actually come up with the big picture, the whole scenario at least. Okay. Now let's come to the modeling part of it, right? So when we are doing a modeling, how do we actually create this model where we generate multiple flow rate pressure data for healthy pump as well as for different pumps which are faulty, which is having a blocked inlet, or it can having a some form of a bearing. So we have this crank. So this is a typical triplex pump where we have like 3 plungers, right? So these 3 plungers are there, and we are getting the volume flow rate, the pressure and the volume flow rate as an output. So that's where comes in MATLAB. So if you have used MATLAB or Simulink, so MATLAB and Simulink, there is something else called SimScape. So I'll talk about SimScape. So this is done in SimScape. So let me show what that thing actually does. This is a typical SimScape environment. So I'll go over to a little bit about MATLAB. Yes, we can do language translation using NLP. That uses, so natural language processing can be done using NLP. So again, that ties up with the question of the networks. Like you can use multiple of the RNNs and LSTM as well for language translations as well. So that leads to the deep learning spectrum of its. We can talk with you later on how we do deep learning using for language translation. So we have in MATLAB also an inbuilt example to take care of that, which you can look into later on as well. Okay. So now if I go to actually the MATLAB environment, let me see how do we do that. So this is the typical MATLAB environment, right? So now in this MATLAB environment, can I just, okay. So in this MATLAB environment, I'm just taking this to a different, yes, significance of image processing. Very nice question. I'll come back to that just after this. Because we have a example, I'll just try to find out that slide deck as well, where we talk about image processing in manufacturing. Okay. So now what we are doing here is, this is the MATLAB window. I think I have to go to the mouse spectrum. Anybody, so in terms of MATLAB experience, if you have used MATLAB before, if you can say yes and no, that will be also useful. And also Simulink. So if you have used Simulink, SimScape, you can just write in the chat window that I have used Simulink, I have used Simulink, SimScape, or I have not heard about MATLAB, Simulink, SimScape. So if you can write in the chat window, okay, nice. Yeah, so in Octave, you can do parts of it. So I'll talk about something which is called SimScape now. So this is the MATLAB window. In MATLAB, there is multiple codings and things which you can do. There is something called Simulink. So Simulink is, where you can do using a block diagram based approach. So let me just go into the, so you can, this is how we go to Simulink. And then what happens is you have this environment where, because in MATLAB you can write codes and things. The advantage of using Simulink and SimScape is, that's what the advantage is with robotics as well. I'll touch upon robotics in this category a little bit, because this is where we do all those sort of environment simulations. We can do multiple different sorts of robotics without writing codes. So in this environment, just to show this environment, how this environment works. So if I have to say, for example, draw a sine plot, I can just take a sine wave from here, sine wave. So I'm just searching sine, and then I see sine wave, right? So we have the sine wave, and then I use something called a sync. So sync means where I can, not sign, sorry about that. So I'm double clicking, this magnifying glass is coming, and I'm writing sync. What I want is a scope. So scope means for plotting, right? So it's coming from the word oscilloscope. And then what I'm doing is you can just connect these two, right? So if I just connect these two, I'll zoom this up. So I have a sine wave and then I have a scope. So if I double click on the scope, it is there on my other monitor. And then if I run this, uh, we have a sine curve. Now I can change the time because Simulink inherently is a time-based solver. So I'm changing the time from here and then running it again. So we see the sine curve. Now say for example, if I have to add noise to it, what I can do is I have this one. I again double click here, get this magnifying glass and say random number. So I have a random number. I'm just adding, if I want to add both of them. So you can see there is this add and I can change plus and things like that. Now, instead of having that, what I'm doing is I'm just connecting the sine to one of these and then connecting the random number to one of these and then connecting. Yeah, my mouse is creating a little bit of trouble. So we have this. And then if you see the scope and if I run this again, you see that the sine curve is added, the random number is added to our sine curve. So like this, you can keep on doing in Simulink a lot of things. I'll show you this library browser. So in this library browser, what we have here is there are multiple of these blocks. So say, for example, if I go to math operations, right? You have absolute. So there is a left port and a right port. So if I give something value and then the absolute value will come out in the output. And like this, you can do multiple sorts of mathematical operations and so on and so forth. Now, if I go down a little bit, there is something called SimScape, right? So if I go into SimScape and then if I go into electrical, maybe I can go to mechanical because that will be more useful. And then go to say translation elements. What you see here is all the physical blocks, right? So this is something is a very advantage of SimScape, like the MATLAB environment. So all these things runs on MATLAB. But like say, for example, in Octave, these things are not there because we can use the physical blocks like these things. So we have mass. We can, if you want to do a mass spring damper, you can use a mass, you can use a damper, you can use a spring, and then just connect them the right way. And then what you can have is, this form of a system where you do not go into the equation at all, right? That is the advantage of the SimScape. And like this, you can go on a lot of things. There is something called, so for example, multibody, right? If I go to multibody, you can see there is belts and cables, gears and couplings, they're joints. So if I go into joints, you have all these different forms of joints, planar joint, prismatic joint, revolute joints, then there is belts and cables. So if I go to multibody again, belts and cables. So all these blocks are there, which we can just use and create our design, what we want to do, right? And that is the advantage of this entire SimScape. Let me show some examples here before we talk about the pump example. Like say, for example, which I've done. And then all these things are also there in the documentation. So the way we can, these are, when you install MATLAB, all these examples come up, which you can play with. So if I say SM, welding robot, let's see how this example looks like. SM means SimScape multibody. Welding robot is one example which we have. So let me show you this example. This is all there. So this is where we have a robot which can do welding, right? Now let me run this. You can see how it looks like. And we have the nice visualization here as well, right? So say what we have trained this robot to do this welding analysis here, weld along this designs, and that's what it is doing, right? And you can create all these sort of a robotic hand and these things. It's not very difficult. And you have the drawing in AutoCAD. You can also import from AutoCAD because, as you know, like MATLAB Simulink, this is not a design software. If you have a drawing thing to be done, you can do it in AutoCAD or SolidWorks, and there's a very easy way to import from those for the dynamic simulation. So this is one of them, welding robot, and these are all there, in our documentations. This is from where you can search. One more thing is The backhoe is also another interesting thing. It's a crane, automated crane simulation. So this is where it is. If I run this, so this means it's compiling, this is running. And if you want to get started, I'll share some resources at the end as well. This is not very difficult to understand and things. Like this, you can see this is a crane. You know, you can do this sort of simulations as well here. And then let's see what else. Oh, this thing has got, just continuing. The other one I have here is say a gear, right? A backhoe. A backhoe we talked about. Test rig is one of them. This is a gear, and this is very nice to show the visualization of multiple of these operations. And these are easy to scale up. That is one another advantage. Like say for example here, if you look into this is just a gear assembly, and then we can visualize how the gear looks like. The number of teeth and how it affects the teeth and all those things. So Simscape is where we do not go into the mathematics, and we use these physical blocks to build all these components, right? And that's how we did this pump model. And then you can just say, for example, if I do not want this teeth, right? We get rid of one teeth of it and then do the simulation. And then we know what is a faulty data. That is the advantage of, you know, simulating all these things. And like this, we can do a lot of things. Let me one example, since it's, I mean, we have the robotics part as well here. So let me just show one example, which we talk about in our robotics webinars in general. Say, for example, this double link example. So this is like 2 links if I have, right? So this is 2 links. I'll run this. Again, this is easy to do. This is there are multiple help files, so this is like 2 links, right, moving around. Now if I have to add one more link to it, the things what I need to do is very easy. I don't have to do muching else. I can just copy my one of these blocks, and then I copy all of them, paste them, right? Because I'm just copying block 2 and then adding to another one, right? And then I just connect all of them. Oops. So I have to connect this. So this is like a rigid transform. So if you are doing robotics, we have to do all these transforms, right? If I don't want the plots, I can turn off my sensing, and you can see that this goes like this, and then we connect this to this. So I just add one more block to it. And this is like a rigid transform, a revolute joint. If you are into robotics, you will know the importance of, you know, rigid transform and revolute joints, right? So these are all blocks which we can add. Now, what I did now, if I see the visualization, I added one more link. Both of them are blue color. Maybe I can change the color so that it becomes more better. So I can go to the graphic area here, go for the visual properties, change the color to something more different, create apply, you know, and then run it. Then you see that we have 3 links. So it is easy to scale up. And if I have to rotate the axis by 90 degree, I can go to the rigid transform block, put a 90 degree axis, and then this will rotate by 90 degrees. So this is Simscape. In Simscape, we have all these blocks where we use for our modeling purposes. Like it can be belt pulley, it can be robotics, it can be pumps. In terms of, I'll show one more example before. Okay, the way we can go all these things is you can go to the documentation. The documentation is very easy to get to. So I can just write here doc and then say Simscape, Simscape multibody, right? Or rather just Simscape. So if I just say doc Simscape, the documentation opens up. Documentation is basically the help area. And then if I go to examples, you will see there are a lot of examples here. So you can just start with a mass spring damper, which is very easy to do. Electrical models, and all these examples are all there with the source codes and all the codes. So you can just save them, name it to a different thing, and then play with it. It can be gas models, moist air, fluids, thermals, all those different things. These are all there, which you can look into later on as well. Okay. So this is basically Simscape, and the pump model, what we are doing here is in Simscape, because in Simscape, we have a DC motor. So this green DC motor model is basically a pump model, which so this pump model we can I mean, it's not like you have a full pump, but we have the plungers and the rotor, and we get all of them and just join them in the right way so that we actually have the pump. And we club them with a DC motor, because one of the advantages when we are doing all this problem, these are all interdisciplinary, right? We have electrical DC motor stuff, we have mechanical parts to it, and all those things can be clubbed. Like there are collaborators in mechanical, like I'm from mechanical, and we have my colleagues here are one from mechanical, like Pranav and Anand. They have different backgrounds, and we are all in the team here where we work with academia. We work with academia on research, curriculum engagements, and we have people from different backgrounds. So we talk with each other in a way as well, and then find out how we can add multiple different disciplines together. Right, so that's the advantage of Simulink, because we can talk with multiple different disciplines, because the objective here is to solve the problem, and then for that problem, whatever needs, we can join together in one way. So now looking back to this problem in Simskip, we draw the simulation, we create the simulation of these plungers, like the way we talked about. I just gave some robotics flavor as well, because the robotics is part of this FDP, so that how do you know, you need to use that Simscape for the robotics part of it. And this is where all those manufacturing robotics comes into the picture as well. And once we do that, this is all it looks like in Simulink and Simscape. And Simscape, we have these valves. You can add these valves, and you can add leakage to valves and all those things as well. And finally, we come up with this model, right? And how it looks like, let me just play this video. Right, so if I go inside the pump is this is how it looks like in Simulink, right? What I was talking about. So we have the cylinder, we have the plunger, and we have this rods and revolute joints and the check valves and all those things. So this is what the pump looks like. And then we can just go into the fault and switch on the fault or switch off the fault. Depends on what I want. If I want the fault on, we can just switch on the fault. And then we see that the faults gets come up in this visualization, right? Whether it's a blocked inlet or a plunger or a whatever the plumb fault is. So we see this leakage block comes in. So we can have this block, come up as an interactive ways as well. And like this, we create the faults, right? We create the faults inside the Simscape environment, the Simulink Simscape environment. So Simulink and Simscape both works in the same environment. Simulink basically works using the mathematical operations. Simscape takes the physical blocks like pump, the motor, the valve, all those physical blocks. And then we join them and create the system design. We add the faults, whichever faults we want, because we have to generate data. We can generate as much data as we want. We can turn on any of the faults and we generate the faults. So that's what we are doing. We are clicking run and we are generating data, right? That's what we are doing here. And this example I'm talking about, this pump, this is an exact example which has been used for an industry, Baker Hughes. Our team who works with Baker Hughes, actually, we work with them and creating this solution for them, where we generate the fault data using the Simscape. And then we'll use the AI model, the machine learning model, to classify the fault, right? So this is how we generate the data for any kinds of. So we turn on the fault, we generate the data. That's about it. We create the simulation environment, we turn on the fault, and we generate data. Okay. Now let's proceed. So this is how we get into this two environment of how we actually create the simulation environment. Yes, I'll share resources to learn all these things. The last 10 minutes, I'll talk about resources only. So once I finish all these things, okay. Okay. So now we are, where are we now? If you look into the entire, so we generate all these sort of different sorts of data. So we generate, we are not limited as such now to generate data. We are limited in terms of we need time and simulation power and all those things. But conceptually, we can generate data. So we can turn on the fault, we generate data. That's about it. And in MATLAB, the data gets stored as this .mat file. Right. So now if I'll just probably go to this workflow again. So this is what we are talking about. This is the data. So we are here. So we have this generated data and sensor data. There is nothing much. You have the machine running. You have a pressure meter. You have a rotometer. So you just take the data for the pressure and flow rate. So that's how we get the sensor data. So till now, what we have done is we are in this stage, right? The next stage is pre-processing the data. So how do we take the data to MATLAB? And then feature extraction and train model. So now what I'll do is I'll talk about these two stage, right? The pre-processed data and feature extraction. There are multiple ways we can do that in MATLAB. So if you have data, this is very specific. If you have data in any cloud like Microsoft Azure or Amazon S3 or Hadoop, you can. So we have like MATLAB installed in all these platforms. So we have collaborations with Microsoft, Amazon for these things. So what we can do is we can run data on the cloud as well. Cloud as in Amazon or Microsoft Azure, or it can be a local cloud. Like, if there is a cluster running with multiple machines, we can just do that as well. So what I'll do is, and there are multiple ways you can handle the data. There's commands called data store, which is basically a smart way of handling multiple different sorts of data. Now, what I'll do is I'll again go over to MATLAB. So here, again in MATLAB, we have when you install MATLAB, the latest version, so I'm using 2020, we have multiple example files. So for the pump file, we have something already loaded. So so this is how we clear our workspace. So when I say clear all, it actually clears this workspace. So it does not have anything in the memory. So I get rid of these files here. Right. And then what we can do is there's something called a pump data. So if I go to saved pump data, so this is already there. So I just click this. So I take this data. Load means it's just loading this. So I load this. Now what we see here, I have this pump data, right? So this pump data is something called 240.x3. Now what is this pump data? If I just double click here, right? So if you double click here, you see that there is this something called 1201x1. This is the flow, this is the pressure, and this is the fault code. So we can have like different sorts of faults. We talked about these 3 faults or 6 faults. So we can code them at what fault. Now, if you look here, this is a table. It says this is a table, and inside this table there is this timetable sort of things. Timetable here, and then fault code. Now, what is this timetable, and how many of them are here? Let's see. If I go down, you can see that we have around 240 data. So we have 240 data points. Now, what is each of these things? So if I see here pump data, if I can just write here pump data, you see that this is a timetable, right? This is this timetable which contains all these fault codes and stuff. Now, if I want to access any of these, so there is flow, there is pressure, and there is fault code. Say, for example, if I want to access only the fault, only the flow. So this is called something in computer programming language. This is a structure, and where we have like all these fields and stuff. So now if I have to access only the flow, I can say, maybe I can just say home so that I take care of this. So pump data, right? And then I say flow. Then I see only the flow. So I have only this 240 data points of this flow, right? And once I have this flow, if I want to see each of them, what I can do is I can go here, click 1. So that means I'll go to 1. So each of them is a 1201x1 timetable. Now, what does that mean? So when I say 1, so I'll go to the inside of 1, the first one. So that means if I am going from 0 to 1.2 seconds, and this is my flow rate, right? So this is my flow rate, and this is the timestamp. So the left-hand column is I have timestamp, and the right-hand column here is my flow rate, right? And all of them is there in any of each of those timetables. So in the timetable, what we have, so if you remember the timetable, it contains 1201 data points for one case, and such we have 240 of those cases. So imagine you have 240 pumps, right? So from each pump, you are getting a time series data. So each of them is one pump. So the first pump is 1201 flow and then 12,001 data. So we have 12,000 times 240, right? So many pumps data we have, and each of them has flow, pressure, and fault code. So this is the data we get in, right? We got from SimScape multibody or SimScape whatever. From their SimScape, we get the data to MATLAB in this format, right? And now once we have the data, now what can we do with the data? We can plot the data. We can do a lot of things with the data. We can do those things in multiple different forms. I'll show a very easy way. In MATLAB, there is all these different apps, right? So we can do curve fitting in app. You can do optimization, PID tuner. The advantage of the apps is this a graphical user interface. So you don't have to write codes to start from scratch, and you can generate the code. You can generate MATLAB code. You can also generate C or C++ code. So MATLAB coder typically converts any MATLAB code to a C or C++ code. So you can do that using this MATLAB coder. And then there are a bunch of other apps. There is one more app. There is something called diagnostic feature app. So I'll just open up this app now. Let's see how it looks like. So I'm opening up the diagnostic feature app now, like real time now. So I have this app now open, right? So now I take the data. So it's a multi-member because we have these timetables, and each of those timetables has different data. So I click on this one data. And from here, I have this pump data. So this takes anything from the workspace. So from the workspace, I take this pump data and I click on next. So it tells me there is this fault code. There is a flow time, flow, and pressure. So I click on next and import the data. So I just take in the data in my app, right? So in this app now, if I click on flow data and I click on signal trace, you see that this is creating this trace plot. So this is my signal. Signal in the sense, this contains the flow with time for all the data, for all the 240 times, 240 pumps. So we have all this data from 0 to 1.2 seconds, the time series data, how it starts from how the flow looks like. Similarly, we can do for pressure. We can do the same thing for pressure and flow rate, right? So once we have this flow data, we can do a bunch of things here. So this is how it looks like visually as a time series data. Now, if I go here in this feature explorer part, you can see there are multiple different things, options here. If I go to this signal trace, there is something called ensemble view, and then I can group by fault codes. If I click on that, then you can see also the fault codes gets kind of mapped on this time series data. So which flow rate corresponds to which fault. So the fault code 0 is like the healthy one, and then we're just putting fault codes for each of those faulties. Like the fault ones is remember that's blocked inlet, the worn bearing, all those things are there as well. And once we have that, once we have all those data, now if I go to Feature Explorer, we can go to this time domain features and then click on signal features, right? So if I click on signal features, we see that all the time series data, time series features are here. Time series features means when we are looking from the time series domain, because that means like a mean, kurtosis, standard deviation, all those are time series features. So you can click on the time series features you want. By default, it is mean, standard deviation, all these things are there. So we click on OK, right? So then what happens is, so if I click on the signal feature, not phrases, and click on OK, right? So then the signal features dialogs box is open. So I go to the feature explorer, and then let me just see where it went. Sorry about that. Yeah, so it is in the other window. Okay, so here we get the signal features of the time series data. So say for example, standard deviation, skewness, shape factor, RMS. So whatever we choose, we get a histogram of all the signal features in this window, right? If you want to see the features, we can always go to the feature table. So if I go to the feature table, oops, it's again clicking. You can see all these features are here as well. So this clearance factor and all sorts of different features are there. So this is the histogram and this is the feature table. Oops, it's got a little hang. Yeah, sorry about that. The computer has got hanged. Okay, I think we can proceed. Yeah. Let's see if I go now. This is the time series features which we get, right? Now, if I go back to the slide once, so we have now the thing is it's not always that if I look from a time series domain we find out the features. We can have frequency domain features. Oops. Yeah, so we can have the frequency domain features because whenever we have a time series data, we can always go to the frequency domain and see what are the frequency domain features. Those can be power weight spectral domain, and we can have time frequency domain. We can go to the spectrogram and find out the spectral entropy and spectral kurtosis. Now, if I take the time series data, this is how the faults look like. So we have the healthy as well as the faulty. So the healthy one is black colored and the colored ones are faulty, different sorts of faults. So if you see the time series data, there is not much difference we can find out from here. But then if I look into the mean, right? So if you look into the mean is a time series feature. So we see that this is how the healthy looks like. And the blocked inlet, if we draw the box plot, this is how it looks like. Right, so so if I have to differentiate between a healthy versus a blocked inlet, I can just say if the mean is above 7.245, it is healthy. If the mean is less than 7.245, it is blocked inlet. Right, that's about it. So that's what we can do. We do not have to go for AI or anything. We can just write an if-else statement. So if the mean of my pressure is greater than 7.245, it is healthy. If the mean is less than, so if I go to the annotate again, yeah. So for example, this is where we can have a line, and above it it's healthy, below it is a blocked inlet. But the problem is we do not have always this kind of an overlap. What it means is, say for example, if I have to look all the faults, and if I draw the mean for all the faults, you see that the healthy one is here, right? But all of them have overlap. So we cannot say, so if the mean is around 7.225, we do not know which fault it is. It can be any of the faults, right? So how do we distinguish from all the faults? How do we distinguish which specific fault has occurred? That's what we cannot do if we do only mean. And that is where what we can do using a spectral domain as well, because we cannot do using the time domain features. Now, if I see into this time domain features so how do we get into the spectral domain? We take typically something called an FFT. And what we can do here in this area is, we can there are multiple ways you can go to spectral domain in MATLAB. You can basically use signal analyzer app. You can use the command called FFT, pspectrum, or anything. Here in this app, what we can do is we can also go and then say, for example, if I click on the signal, and then if I click on spectral estimation, right? If you click on spectral estimation, we can create on power spectrum. And if I click on power spectrum, it will automatically do a FFT and go to our spectral domain. So it's saying it's processing. So we have this 240 pump data. Right, let's wait a little bit. So another window comes up, which is the power spectrum. So we actually see how the power spectrum looks like. This is how the power spectrum looks like. And from the power spectrum, now what we can do is we can find out the spectral features as well. So if I click on spectral features and click on OK, it's again creating. So it will, for all the 240 data set, it will find out the features, like that can be a spectral kurtosis, it can be the maximum dominant frequency, and all those different sorts of things. So we do not have to know signal processing to do all those things. That's my point. So this is how we can find out all the spectral features as well. And once this is done, it will plot and all those things. For the lack of time, I'll just go over to the slide decks and keep on proceeding. So this is how we can draw the spectral domain features. Now the advantage is if you look into here, for the time domain and the frequency domain. So for all the faults, right? For all the faults, we do not see any difference in the time domain. Like how can we differentiate in the faults? But if you look into the magnitude in the frequency domain, we see that there are differences, right? Now specifically, let me just look into these two. Like if you have blocked inlet and blocked inlet versus sealed leakage. So if you compare these two, right? These two, there is no difference in the time domain. But if you compare between the frequency domain analysis, you see that the magnitude of the spectrum. So for seal leakage plus blocked inlet, the magnitude is around 0.01, right? But if you have only blocked inlet, the magnitude of this frequency is 0.05. So now if you look into the spectral domain, and then if I say, if the magnitude of this frequency, of the frequency of value 2000, if the magnitude of that frequency is greater than 0.01, we have blocked inlet. If the magnitude is less than 0.01, we have a fault which is combination of seal leakage and blocked inlet, right? But we cannot do that from the time domain. So once we go to the frequency domain and see this feature, and then we find out this is a distinguishing feature between these two faults. So this is what we do in the feature extraction part, right? And now we do not have to do all those things, a lot of things. We can just use one app to do that thing. That's what we did using the Diagnostic Feature Designer app. So this is a video which I was just doing. Is this pump data is also there in our in MATLAB. So whatever we were doing, these are all there. So for example, this is also, we can go to the documentation from here. So if I say pump data, I think it says analyze pump data or something. We just need to give the right search so that we actually find out. Yeah. So analyze and select pump data. So you can go to this documentation and you can open up in LiveScript so that this will actually come up in, when you install MATLAB, all these examples and things come up. So you can just follow the step by step and this will come up as well. Okay. So let me go back to the slides again. Here it is. And I will share the slides anyway. This contains the link there. And once we have the features, what we can do is, if I show you here, there is an option of ranking the features, right? So what we can do is we can rank the features as well. So if I click on rank the features, it will rank you the features as in which feature is how much important, right? So how much importance is there in what feature? So that we can do it here very easily. And we use certain things called one-way ANOVA. Those are all inbuilt here, so we don't have to know what is there, what is happening in terms of rank. So we can rank the features in this way, right? So what we are doing is we are just ranking the features by one-way ANOVA. So that what happens is, if you have 100 features, you know that the first rank, like it's just in a ranking in a school, so where we find out these are the features that are more important. And once we have the features of the ranking features, we take them to another app, which is called Classification Learner app. So this is what Ajay was talking about, the SBMs. So Classification Learner is another app where we can just import these features to Classification Learner app. And in this Classification Learner app, what we see is we have here all the algorithms, right? So SBM, decision tree, neighbor, nearest neighbor. So the algorithms are all there. So once we have the features, we take them to Classification Learner app and we select the algorithm we want. If we do not know which algorithm we want, we can choose all the algorithms and then train the features. And once we train the features, we find out which is the accuracy, which is the best accuracy. We see that this model has the best accuracy. So then we just choose that model. So this is how we choose the model. So we can choose it as using Classification Learner app if we have to do classification. If I have to do prediction, we can use LSTMs, the deep learning models as well. So whatever model we use, we can use a deep network design. We can use a deep network model as well, LSTMs, RNNs, or we can use NLMs, NLP, the natural language processing. So once we have those, we can take them to the modeling, we can get the algorithm out of that. This is one way, the classification, because here the problem we are addressing is classification. We want to classify which sort of fault we have. And that is why we are using this Classification Learner app. And then from here, we choose the algorithm what we have, right? The advantage of all these apps is if I just show using this diagnostic feature app once, oops, this is not the right one. So if I go to this diagnostic feature, we can export. So we can export the features, we can export to a data set and all those sort of things which we can do. And also we can generate the MATLAB code from here, or we can export the C code as well, right? So these are the things that we can do. Okay. So this is what we can get from a classification learner matrix as well, which we can find out, you know, how good we are. So we can get the prediction versus actual as well, right? The final part is deployment. So what we can do is we can create an app like the Google Translator app we talked about. We can very easily create the app as well. We can create the app, or we can generate the C code out of it, or we can generate a MATLAB compiler, or put it on a hardware. We can put it on a Raspberry Pi, we can put on an Arduino, we can create an Android app, we can create an iPhone app, all those sort of things, or we can put in compilers as well. And we can create an app which people can use without MATLAB as well. These are all those things we can put in cloud and all those things. This is more of a industry specific thing, which I'm not skipping at this point. Okay, so if I have to summarize, so we have the data, we take the data, we do the simulation using Simscape multibody, Simscape fluid, Simscape thermal, whatever we can. So whatever we are doing in the simulation world, and then we generate the data, right? So the data can be from the sensor or from the simulation. Once we have the data, we take the data to the diagnostic feature app, where we find out we plot the data, we visualize the plot. We do go from the time domain to spectral domain to find out the relevant frequencies. And then we do the feature extraction, which can be time domain features or it can be frequency domain features. So we find out whichever frequency we want, we rank the features, which are the best frequencies, which are the best features. And then we take it to classification learner app to find out which model suits best for the features, right? And then we can do condition indicating as well. There are equations to find out. Once we have the features, we can either find out the fault classification. That's what we were doing. Like if I give a random data, now it will tell me which sort of fault I have, whether I have a blocked inlet, whether we have a worm bearing, whether we have a leakage, what sort of a fault combination of the things. And then finally we deploy it on a hardware or create an app and share with other people. So what we do is using this the app, the Simscape, the MATLAB environment, we covered this end-to-end workflow, which takes care from the data acquisition to creating the simulation world, to creating the apps, deploying it to the hardware, finding out the features and all different sorts of things. This is more of the remaining useful life, and for remaining useful life this is specifically for industries. What they want to find out is how long the machine will run, and there are mathematical models, so we can club those mathematical models. So if I give the features to it, it will tell me how long the machine will run. So for example, the remaining useful life, this is the threshold, and we see using this equation, there is a standard equation for that, and it tells me when it crosses the threshold. So after this black line gets crossover, then it cannot run anymore, right? So this is a standard equation by which you can find out the remaining useful life. So I'm not going into details of this. This is not specifically needed. And again, when we share the slide, you can find out how what I talked about is the specific example which has been used in Baker Hughes for their health monitoring system. Okay, so we talked about a data-driven model, which is a classification learner app and all those things, with a physics-based model. So whatever we did in Simscape is a physics-based model. It's a simulation of the pump. So we have to find out the condition indicators. Condition indicators are nothing but the features. It's the same language. People in machine learning use features. People in machines in manufacturing world use condition indicators. So we can use whatever terminology we want so that we create a robust AI model, a classification model. And finally, we have how much time your AI model has to act. So we deploy this on the hardware, right? So that's the final things that we walked about. I'll talk about the resources now. This is our email ID. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. This is also, if you can go to this link, I'll show you what this thing is. If I go in this link, it takes me to the predictive maintenance tech talk. So this link will share all these links in the chat window as well. So this is finally multiple webinars on whatever we talked about in a little more detail. Thanks for sharing the link of MATLAB Academy, Anand. That's very useful. So let me tell you how that looks like. So if I, so say for example, if I go to MATLAB Academy. So once you go to matlabacademy.mathworks.com, I'll post the link once again. So if you go to this link, you will see that you can start MATLAB on-ramp, Simulink on-ramp, machine learning, deep learning, Stateflow. So we talked about all these things, not Stateflow. This comes later on. If you want, you can find out. So what you can do is you can start all these things for free. You can just go, these are all self-paced courses. Self-paced means you can do this course, go watch a movie, come back and do it again. It does not matter. As long as you finish it, you also get a certificate. So it tells you the theory, it tells you how you can do it, and then it gives you assignments. Once you do that, it moves on. So this is basics to start with MATLAB. This is basics to start with Simulink. And then once you do Simulink, you'll understand Simscape as well. This is for machine learning, deep learning. And then there is Stateflow. Since you are, I mean, in terms of robotics, I'll just share one more link. Let me find out where that link is. So we have a inside Git link, inside Git. Awesome. I think I can't find it in the incognito mode, but if I look into here, inside Git. So where we have multiple, examples from the robotics arena. Oops. Yeah, let me just try to find out and I'll share that. So where we can, in terms of robotics also, you have all these different sorts of examples. Where did it go? Yeah, so this is multiple of these examples. Also, you can access, MATLAB online, MATLAB in the browser and all those things. So those are other things which you can also look into. Let me just look for the awesome. Yeah, so yep, this is the link. So I'll share this link as well. So this is, in robotics area, you can just click any link and you will find out many of the manipulation, kinematics of robotics, forward kinematics, inverse kinematics, all those different sorts of things. So you can find out these things from this link as well, specifically in the robotics. And of course, in MATLAB, if you search in the documentation, you can find out a lot of things in this area. So you can find out anything, robotics, manufacturing, predictive maintenance. So all those things comes up if you just search here, right? So these are all those links. Also to start to end with, I'll share let me just share a survey link as well, so that it will be good for us to get any feedback, any comments, any things you have. So I'll share a survey link. Please fill out that survey. Oops. I'll share the link as well, and then so this is the survey form. So I'll share this link, and please feel free to post this survey, fill up the survey, so that it's for our feedback and things like that. So please fill up the survey form. That's also very helpful for us. Yeah, that's about it from my end. If there are any questions, anything you want clarification, please post in the chat window. We can open up for any question, answer, or anything. I hope that was useful. So
thank you very much, sir. You have explained the predictive maintenance from the basic and also with an example of valves.
Right.
I'm sure it will help the participant to be more eager in this field. And your lecture have focused on data-driven model with digital twin and all. And this will be very, very beneficial for participant, including me also. So
Sure.
I'm again thankful for joining here, sir, for your valuable time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I also thank your team, sir, who
Sure.
have joined in this session.
Mhm. Yes. Thanks from us. Thanks to everybody from all of us. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions regarding access, technical issues. We will get you in touch with the right person. If you have any, if you want the software, if there are ways, because we can access through online version as well. So if you have any questions on anything, feel free to reach out and we'll connect with the right person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So,
Thanks.
with your kind permission, now I am concluding the session. I welcome all participants on the next session, which is going to commence from 2:30 onwards. Thank you, Soik sir.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, okay.